down in southwest Missouri. He's married with 2 kids, Memphis and Fisher. Pretty cool names. Shandy is his wife and is a nurse. And Eric's got his master's in social work. Shandy graduated in August and is a nurse and is already making more money than he does. He wears that as a badge. I asked to make sure he didn't get upset that I told that. So I'm very happy that Eric's with us today, and I'd like for you all to just give him a big welcome and say, I say thank you for coming. So let's enjoy the presentation.
Yeah, so today is going to be a little different. So I got this thing on me, so like RoboCop or something, I don't know. So I don't know if it sounds too loud or what. I don't know how to adjust that, but we'll see what happens. And just so you know, we are videotaping this. This will be the second time I've been videotaped. The first time I've known that I was being videotaped. So hopefully this goes well. So how many of you have heard of the theory of constraints? Okay. How many of you have some type of a work in progress, task achievement, some type of board that you're using or giving the old college try? Anybody? Okay. All right. So today what I hope to accomplish is give you like a little background. I think it's always good to know context of where things are coming from to kind of understand what the reason behind it is. So we'll talk about how we got involved in TOC and a little bit of where it comes from. And then we'll talk about, basically I'm just going to highlight some of the major principles around TOC. And then we'll get into the principles of flow, which is when we technically start thinking through what these boards all mean and how they can be helpful. And then we'll kind of finish up with looking at, okay, I've done all this, how do I know it's working? We find out if things are working through measures. So we're going to talk about measures. And then we'll talk questions and talk through things if you have logistics about using boards or whatever. And I also want to mention this, that as we're going along today, if something comes in and like you have a question or maybe you just have a criticism and you want to get it out there so we can talk about it, I'll be honest, I'm fine with that. Some of the best conversations that I've had in some of these TOC talks has been when we can have that exchange thinking through, because that's really what TOC is about. It's about understanding a few things and then applying that understanding differently to how we do the processes that allow us to get the stuff done that we need to. So feel free to stop us, pause us, let's chase those rabbits, because I think that's going to be far more valuable of you getting your questions answered than me just like trying to anticipate what kind of questions you might have. So if you've got questions, feel free to ask them. Let me do this. So I would like to know, first of all, let me figure out what circuits we have here. What circuits do we have?
45th.
45th? Where's my 45th circuit? Okay. Right there in a nice row, right? Mm-hmm. Good. And what counties is that?
Lincoln and Pike County.
Lincoln and Pike. Okay. All right. And what was the other circuit I heard? 10th. Where's my 10th circuit? You guys sit in these nice, wonderful rows. You guys are the only people that know that so far. What?
We have the 12th circuit.
Okay, 12th circuit. Where are you at? Okay. What happened?
I came late.
Oh, well, yeah, you guys are just everywhere. Okay, cool. So where are my investigators? Good, good. AC staff? Those of you AC staff, any of you carry AC and FCS? Okay, FCS? Okay. Licensing? Okay. Sort of. On a good day? When you want to? Subsidy? Adoptions? Okay. Supervisors? Good. Program managers? Specialists? Circuit managers? Good, good, good. Any other regional people? Okay, and there's nobody from state office here, right? I had one sneak in. And
I'm watching for you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I gotta know when there's state office people around wherever I go. I don't know why, but and then also we had a hotline person. I had to really watch what I said around the hotline. So good. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about. We're going to work through some of these concepts. But before I do that, I want to talk about how this came to us. So a year ago, November, was when the department was first exposed to these constraints. Now, this is not something that originated with Children's Division, something Children's Division leadership brought to us. It was brought to us through our leadership through the department. And so when it was brought to us, it was brought to not just Children's Division, it was brought to all the divisions in the department. So Division of Youth Services, Division of Legal Services was there, of course FSD, us, and others. So this was brought to us, and basically we spent, 3 days, or actually 2 days being exposed to the concepts. And then on the third day, it got real interesting because basically it was applying TOC, but they put Children's Division down in front of the rest of the department, and they applied it on us. And so that got real interesting when all the eyes were on us and we began to work through these processes. I want to mention this person's name because if you, after today, if you're like, man, I might be interested in some of these things, learning more about it, I would tell you this is the person you need to check out. Her name is Kristen Cox. Kristen Cox is over the operations and budget for the state of Utah. And so it's a little different maybe than what some states, how they operate. Operations and budget may be separate entities. In Utah, they've combined them under the same because they feel like they're attached and go together. And Kristen and her team have used TOC in the state of Utah to really improve government services. So Dr. Corsi actually was exposed to Kristen and the TOC, how it applied to government work. And so that's the connection there. He brought her and her team here. We began to learn. And I'll tell you, this is, I'm no expert in TOC. I don't pretend to be. Here's what happened. I went, I got invited, I went, I was exposed to it, and it really resonated with me to the point where I thought, you know what, this might work. And so I came home with that exposure. I began to talk to my staff and others, and we started doing a few things here and there. And then all of a sudden it clicked. Yeah, this is working. And so that just fueled the fire. And that's what kind of led into, as a circuit manager, we kind of talk. And so I was sharing some of the things we're doing. Other circuit managers began to say, hey, can you come over here and talk about that? I said, sure, I'll come talk about that. So that's what I did. And then another circuit manager found out, and it created energy in this circuit. So another circuit manager, and that's what started happening. And I ended up in the Southwest going to every circuit. And almost every one of those circuits, they asked me to come back twice. And so it is something that's really energizing. And here's what's really awesome about TOC, in my opinion, is it's not complicated. It's not something that requires really complex thinking, okay? The concepts are fairly simple, but just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy. And I don't want you to walk away thinking that TOC just make everything easy. It's not about easy. Some of these concepts are very hard. If they weren't hard, we'd already be doing them, right? So, but they're not complicated concepts. So I think that's probably why it resonated with me a little bit too, is because I'm kind of simple-minded. I'm single-tracked, and I can't complicated things. Really, I get lost in those. So I felt like that really resonated, and it turns out we've seen it do some really impressive things. So that's a little bit of how it came to us. TOC is not a new concept. TOC has been around since the mid-'80s. It comes to us from the manufacturing world. If you know anybody in the manufacturing world, or if you've been there before, you may have heard of TOC, especially if you know anybody in need for leadership. If you ask them, hey, you ever heard of TOC? Almost all of them are going to say they have. And so what TOC is this? It's a process improvement plan. And so it's all about processes. Now, here's here's part of, I think, the problem, and when TOC causes us to think differently, is we're not always thinking about our process. Like, we're just thinking about, I got to get this done, right? I got this report, I got to get it done. I got to go do these home visits, I got to get it done. But when you begin to have a production issue, if you can pull out that process, you can begin to unlock some things that are really going to make a big difference as far as trying to get more productive. And so that's kind of the thing with TOC. And so TOC, coming from the manufacturing world, if you can imagine, our lives are far different than the life in a manufacturing world, right? I mean, we don't, our stuff is very unpredictable. Things that have a process, sometimes that process goes step by step, and other times we do the last step before the first step. That's just how it rolls. And so because of that, TOC had to go through some translation to apply to government work. And that's what Kristen Cox and her team has done. They have begun to translate TOC and apply it to government work. Now, I will say this, as I've looked at TOC over the last year, I really believe that the translation is just getting started. That there's more to come, and as we continue to work through it, we may have to translate parts of it ourselves. And I really feel like that's what we've kind of done. But not only did we translate it to government work, we translated it to child welfare work. And so that's what hopefully you'll get to see today as we move through that. So that's a little bit of how it came to us. That's a little bit of the history. Here's some of the concepts. So probably the number one concept around the theory of constraints is a constraint. What is a constraint? So it's hard. It's without understanding another concept, it's hard to know exactly what a constraint is. So and that other concept is flow. So when I'm talking about constraints and flow, the best way I do it is I visualize a river. That may be because there's no other place I'd rather be than on the river, fishing or kayaking or whatever. So in my mind, when I'm thinking flow, constraint, I'm thinking river. Now, one of my favorite rivers down in southwest Missouri is Big Sugar. Big Sugar is an incredible, clear river, great smallmouth fishing, but Big Sugar has this problem. Big Sugar is a smaller creek, and when the creek is small, it flows pretty good. But all of a sudden, over and over and over again, you come on these big pools of water. Now, what happens to the flow if you've ever been on a river and you hit a big pool of water? Slows down. And guess what I got to start doing? Paddling. And I'm a fat guy. I don't know how to shave. I don't want to paddle, right? So I got to paddle through these big pools. And I finally get to the end. I'm like, all right, I got flow. And there I go until I hit the next big pool of water, and I got to start paddling again. So when I'm thinking flow, I'm thinking about a river. So what a constraint is where the river flow slows down. Okay? Now, we only can find where the constraint is or where the flow slows down when we identify the process. And I think, here's what we do. We have some sort of production problem. We're getting behind on, worker with child visits or something. And so we get behind, and then we just think, well, why are we getting behind? And then we create some sort of hypothesis. And then we adopt that hypothesis as if it was accurate. Well, the reality of it is, we're just guessing. We don't really know what is creating the production issue. We think we know, but the difference with TOC is we can find out for sure once we identify our process. So it doesn't matter what you're doing, whatever you're producing, whatever job you're trying to get done, whatever task. There's a process there, but the problem is it's not always easy to see. And that's what, when I mentioned earlier that this is simple, but maybe not easy. It's simple, like concept, figure out what your process is step by step, but it's not always easy to see. So like here, we have a process outlined, a general process for investigations. We could see that. I mean, if you've ever been an investigator and you think about it, there is a clear investigative process that we go through routinely over and over and over. We kind of outlined that on this board. When I started thinking about our process in alternative care, I said, okay, what's our process when we're doing reunification? And I go, I don't know. And I thought about it, I was like, what is our process? And it really took me some time to come up with any sort of idea on what our process in alternative care is. Because I started, you can get as detailed as, within 72 hours you got to have your meeting, you got to go see the kid, you got to do, you can start outlining a process like that. But that's not really, like, if you think about when you're looking at your processes, you're always thinking about the end goal. Like, how do I complete this? And, I guess I could go through every step for, 12 months in an AC case, but that's going to be one heck of a board, right? So, I really struggled with finding this process for alternative care. After a lot of thought and then also some work around trajectory and science safety, this idea came to me for alternative care. And once I started really unpacking that, it made a lot of sense. We're going to talk about that more. So, but we have flow, we have constraints, okay? Now, here's the next concept associated with TOC. Now, this may push you around a little bit. And I'll be honest, if one of the things I think TOC does that really is valuable is it pushes us. Because it causes us to look at things a little differently, push us into places that we don't really like or we're uncomfortable with. But if we go there, we may find different results. Okay? And so this next concept may push you a little bit. And this is the concept of capacity. So when we think about capacity, we think about capacity in three different ways. One is individual capacity. Now, here's where it may push you. We have a culture that hasn't accepted this. Okay? And here's what it is. Each one of us has a different level of capacity. Okay? And when we're honest with ourselves, we think about, our teams, everybody has a different level of capacity. Some people have a high level of capacity. Some people, it's not so high. And that doesn't make it bad, but it's a reality. Everybody has a different level of capacity. TOC tells us this, that all organizations have hidden capacity. And so when you begin to understand that individuals have different levels of capacity, and you sit in a culture where we treat everybody as if they have equal capacity, that automatically lends itself to, guess what? There's hidden capacity that we're not utilizing. I'll give you an example. When we started talking about TOC, I come back and begin to think about things a little differently. So one of the things that really changed for me is I didn't want to know how many reports did they get this month. I want to know how many reports do you have right now. How many reports do you have sitting on your desk right now? So I began to track all that. And I got my first pull of numbers. And I was looking at my investigators and, they had, some of them maybe 20, 25 or whatever. Well, I got down to this one investigator. You know how many open reports she had? 5. And I thought, why do I not know this? Why does this person only have 5 reports? Did we mess up? Did we not assign her enough reports? So I'm about to look. And she was like second to the top as far as the number of reports received. I said, okay, we gave her her fair share. Why does she have 5 reports? So, and in talking with her, I said, hey, how come I don't know about this? And she really said, well, I didn't want anybody to know. She was almost embarrassed by the fact that she only had 5. And I think part of it was she knew that some of her partners were carrying 20, 25. But our culture said, you know what? We get the same, and I got mine done, they didn't. That's on them. That's kind of how this is set up, right? And so we begin to unpack that, and I did some AI work with her to figure out how do you, because I figured out that not only was she at 5, that's where she lived. I mean, if she had 7, 8 reports, I knew she just came off of a weekend. Because what she would do is she'd almost get her reports down to 0 if she could before her weekend. That way, when she had her weekend, she just had those reports. And so begin to look at what she was doing. Well, she was doing this. She was doing TOC. She didn't know it. This is how she worked. It's how she operated. And so we begin to unpack that and figure out how to utilize that. what she was doing, trying to replicate that. That's kind of the essence of science of safety and AI. And so we really started to notice some impact. But capacity, our system is set up like not to think about people as individual capacity. And I think we short sell ourselves when we do that, because this person never got recognized for being that good. She never got any sort of acknowledgement. I didn't even know that she was that good. And I really wish I could have known that so I could celebrate that with her. And so, but here's the thing about it. Our culture is set up where we're not okay with that. And I know this whole conversation may be scaring some of you, but I just wonder if we became more okay with that. What if we didn't think about the number of reports I got in a month, but all we thought about was how many do I have open right now? And we didn't know the rest of the information? Would we be okay with that if that's how our culture was set up? I mean, if everybody only knew that, I've got 10, I've got 11, but at the end of the year, because some people are higher performers, that could lend itself to one person doing twice as many reports as another person, because we no longer track that. And I can tell you right now, there's not an office in our state that would be okay with that. And I'm not saying we have to be, but here's what I'm saying. We got hidden capacity, and we got to find a way to access it. Because when we can start accessing that, it's going to help the entire group. When we can access these pockets of hidden capacity. But what TOC does is it causes us to look for it in different ways. And I can guarantee you, looking at individual capacity and looking at high performers a little differently, and having a culture that rallies around those high performers instead of, this culture of like, I can't do any more work than somebody else because that's not fair. Like, that's where we land. And I think about other companies and organizations, I don't think they think that way. Like in production, like you got two people on a production line, they're working as hard as they can to produce as much as they can for the company, but they're getting compensated equally in most of those cases. So, I don't know what it would take, and I'm not saying everything you're doing is wrong or it has to change, but my point is this, like, there are some things that we could be doing that would help out everybody that at this point, because of our culture, we're not willing to do. And so, if we're going to go through some level of culture change, it has to happen at all levels. It can't be from the top down, and it certainly can't be from the bottom up. Every level has to look each other in the eye or look in the mirror and say, you know what, maybe we're going to be okay with doing this a little differently. Because right now we're doing it one way, and I feel like it's limiting our capacity. Okay? So that's individual capacity. The next thing is all of our work requires a certain level of capacity. Where are my investigators at? Okay, so investigators, tell me this. Are all investigations created equal? Do we assign them as if they are?
Yes.
We do, don't we? What if we didn't? What if we could figure out a way that we could understand, the capacity that certain tasks require? The same way, we could think the same way in alternative care too. Are all alternative care cases created equal? No, they're not. But do we assign them as if they are? Yeah. Because why? Because we look at it like this. Who's done the staffing analysis? Who gets to do that great chore every month? Yeah. So we've got these standards, which I'm not saying this is terrible. I'm just saying maybe there's a different way that maybe works better. Because right now we just look at how many you got. Like, how many cases you got, how many did you get this month. There's other things that could allow us to look and view things differently. So we've got individual capacity, our work has a capacity, and then our organization has capacity. So I think about my circuit. I'm a small circuit. We have 4 counties. We have 3 different offices in 3 of those counties. And between those 4 counties, I have 6 investigators. And those 6 investigators spread out between 3 offices. And so if I have 6 investigators, and we'll take investigations. I think on the, what is it, caseload analysis, the full caseload for investigator investigation, was it 12 a month? Is that right? Some of you that do that, I think it's 12. So that's our standard we set. So if I'm using that theoretically as my standard, I got 6 investigators, I can do 12 reports for each one of them in 1 month. How many investigations can my circuit hold in 1 month? Where's my math people? I'm a social worker, I don't know math. 72? Okay, so 72. If I get 73, guess what? My system over capacity. Now TOC would tell us that nothing gets into your system if you don't have the capacity to handle it. Now, in our world, we don't have that luxury, right? So that's a little bit of where the translation comes from. Manufacturing, like they can restrict things, to make their production the most efficient. Like in our world, we can't shut, even though we try. Anybody ever try to unplug the printer? The hotline's coming on? Where are you guys at? I know there's one in the room. Kyle. Okay, so we can't do that. We can't shut our doors. We can't restrict our work from coming in. But how can we think about our capacity? And do we respond differently when we know our investigative unit's at capacity? Do we think differently about what that looks like, or when to take action, or how to plan around it? Those are things that capacity opens up for us as we look through the theory of constraints. So we have capacity, and certainly capacity is directed to flow. So when I talk about flow and capacity together, there's this illustration that TOC uses that kind of illustrates both of them. So let's go back to the manufacturing world, okay? And I didn't know, I guess you guys didn't know this, but we have a manufacturing plant, all of us together, where we lead this thing, okay? We're all great leaders. So any great leader needs a manufacturing plant, right? But I can't remember what we manufacture in our plant. So what do you guys want to manufacture in our manufacturing plant today? Something good. Something real good. I've had some real terrible ideas lately. What do you guys want to manufacture?
Candy?
I appreciate you stepping out and taking the lead. Candy. All right. Candy. All right. All right.
Likes candy.
What kind of candy? Whose favorite candy? Who's got something?
Junior mints.
Junior mints. Junior mints. Those are your favorite? Who's a Junior Mint fan? 3 people. 4.
We're not invested in this.
4 people. Junior Mint people. Okay, but we'll roll with it, just for you 4. All right, I didn't know if you knew this or not, but to produce Junior Mints, it's a 5-step process, okay? And so this right here is going to illustrate our 5-step process. These circles is each step in the process, okay? Now, in 1 hour, here's what we can produce at each step in the process, okay? At step 1, we can produce 15, step 2, 20, step 3, 10. In 1 hour, at step 4, we can produce 25. And then at step 5, in 1 hour, we can produce 30. Here's the question. In 1 hour, how many Junior Mints can our factory produce? 10. Who said that? Our Junior Mint fan, of course. She knows exactly how many Junior Mints we're producing in 1 hour. Okay? 10. Why?
Because that's the least amount we can produce in an hour at step 3.
Yeah. That's the least amount we can produce. Why? Because it's part of our system. And it's the constraint on the system. Because as we're flowing, guess what happens when we get to step 3? The flow slows down. Okay? When the flow slows down, that's when some things happen. Now, here's what TOC tells us about flow. Now, I'll be honest, first time I heard this, I was real skeptical. TOC tells us that if we increase our flow, 3 things are going to happen. One is our quality is going to get better. I think we'd all like that if our families got better quality services. That'd be great. The second I think we'd really like is our production goes up. So if we only do one thing, and that's increase our flow, TOC says that our quality is going to get better and we're going to produce more. Or what TOC is, our throughput is going to go up. Okay? Well, that sounds real good, but it gets even better. You're going to like the last one the best. It says, thirdly, that our operating expense is going to go down. Now, how does that translate to what we do? Guess what our operating expense is? Our operating expense is your time and attention. How many of you would enjoy a day, just one day, where the need for your time and attention, whether it's from your supervisor or from a client, the need for your time and attention goes down. Just one day. Who's going to take that day? Who's signing up for that day? Right? TOC is wisdom. Those three things are going to happen. We're going to get better quality, our throughput's going to go up, and our operating expense is going to go down. I was a little skeptical about that. So we tried it. And guess what? Once it's a slow start, it's like a snowball. It's a slow start. But it's like compound interest. As you continue to gain a little more capacity, we're going to talk about what's actually happening to cause this. But as you get a little more capacity, that capacity then goes into the effort that you're currently making to get more capacity. And as you continue to grow that, it's like a snowball. And it really makes a difference. So I was talking about flow in the 38th circuit. And the gentleman there, he challenged me as I was talking about flow. Because, I was going on about if we can just increase our flow, these great things are going to happen. And he raised his hand, called on me, he said, you know what? I'm not sure I agree with that. I said, okay, I'm not sure I agree with it either, because this was back when we were first getting started. And so he goes, he had work experience at a Walmart distribution center. I didn't know this about Walmart distribution centers, but I guess once a month, they purge all of their inventory. They just get everything gone, clean the warehouse out, and get it gone. He said, it's all hands on deck, everybody's going as fast as they can, and certainly our flow is increasing. He said, but one thing and he said our throughput, our production, yes, it was increasing. He said one thing that did not increase and actually decreased was our quality. He said we were working so fast, so hard, we were making lots of mistakes. We were breaking things. We were shipping things to the wrong place. He said our quality was terrible when we increased our flow. I got to thinking about that. And he's right. Because what we're talking about is not just doing things faster, okay? What we are talking about, and this leads into our next point. It's not about doing it faster. It's about finding more capacity, and we find more capacity through reducing multitasking, okay? So if you take one thing away from today, please take this. Reducing your multitasking is what all this hinges on. Okay? If you can figure out where to reduce your multitasking, you're going to see gains in your capacity and production and all those other things. All right? So when I was at the TOC conference, and we were sitting there, and they went into multitasking, and they said this. They said, TOC tells us that we are all bad multitaskers. Let me ask you a question. How many of you in the room would say that you're a good multitasker? Be honest. I know I just said it was bad, so... All right, so we got a few, and they all seem to be on the back row. I don't know if that's a coincidence. All right, you're probably right. You probably are a good multitasker. But here's the pushback. Multitasking is a really interesting thing that happens because some people, when they multitask, all people lose some capacity, but some just lose a little. People like me, when I try to multitask, I lose all capacity. Like I have no ability to multitask at all. And I'll be honest, when they first said we're all bad multitaskers, I almost jumped up and said yes, because my whole career I've had bosses and people tell me, hey Eric, guess what? You need to get better at multitasking, right? Now, I get it. Like, yeah, we have to juggle lots of things. We have to have some skill set to do so. But even if you are a good multitasker, the pushback is this. I challenge you to really think this through. You probably are losing some capacity. Probably not enough to affect you in your performance, but you're probably losing some capacity. Because TOC tells us that we're all bad multitaskers, and so we got to figure out ways to reduce our multitasking. And here's what multitasking is. It's carrying and multitasking all the stuff in our system. So every report you get as an investigator, that increases your multitasking. Every AC case or a lot of these like monthly duties associated with AC cases, like the longer they're there, that you have increased your multitasking. Okay, so we got to figure out ways to reduce our multitasking. Well, there are some things that we can do, and I'll be really honest and direct with you. These things are not complicated. And you've probably already been told this by somebody at some point in time. But it really is going to take like a commitment and discipline to say, you know what? I'm going to try this and I'm going to see if it makes a difference. Okay? We had people real skeptical and they were doing business a lot of different ways and they weren't sure if they wanted to do this, but I'm telling you, when they did it, it worked. Here is the number one thing you can do to reduce your multitasking, and it's this: working tasks to completion or as close to it before you go on to the next task. Okay? And here's what this looks like in our world. When you go out in the field and do anything, home visit, work with a child visit, interview on investigation, whatever it is, when you come back to the office, the first thing you do is you enter that. Because what that is working things as close to completion as you can. And so the other thing about it is too, like, no one said we had to keep the reports open more than a day. Okay? If you can close a report in the same day, do it. Like if you go out in the field and the stars align, everything's there, grandma came to visit for a collateral contact while you were there or whatever, and you walk back in the office, you can close it right then. Now you do that once and it feels good and it might make a little impact. Over a month you do it 12 times, that's 12 reports that you didn't have to worry about for any amount of time. And it adds up over time. So working things as close to completion as you can is probably the number one thing you can do to reduce your multitasking. And so, I really tell my staff, whether it's AC staff or investigators, like that's what I want them to do. They go out in the field, whatever they did in the field, when the first time they step back in the office, that's what you're entering, what you just went out in the field and did. Now, when you've got a mountain of stuff that's waiting to be entered, that's really tough. But as you can, get that dwindled down and you get to the point where all you have to do is enter in the things you just went out in the field and did, like you don't have that backlog of things weighing you down, like life becomes real good when that happens. And I'm telling you, this is what's happened when people have really been diligent about working their backlogs down, getting in a position where they have capacity to handle these things. So, and it may look like I get a report in the morning, I go work it, I come back in the afternoon, I start typing. Or it could look like I go out on Monday and I work all my stuff that I've been given, and then Tuesday morning I have protected time from 8 to 10 or whatever. In that protected time, I enter everything that I did the day before. It could look like that too. And it can look like however you need it to look like. That works best for you. But if you can figure out some way to do this, I'm telling you, in time, it will really produce some great results for you. Here's the other concept around reducing multitasking that I talk about. And this thing I'm about to talk about does not come from TOC. I did not learn this from anybody else. It really came from right here. So if it's terrible, that's fine. I'm okay with that. But it was a concept that hit me, and I thought, you know what? We do that a lot, in a lot of different ways. So here's how I uncovered this. I had a new SOSA, and in her new role as a supervisor, she wanted to do a really good job. So we began to talk about some of these things, and this was right around the time that I brought TOC back, and it was talking about it. And she said, hey, I wonder if TOC could help us in our clerical roles, be more productive. I said, you know what, you're probably right, let's take a look at it. TOC is a little easier to apply when there's some sort of production issue. So when someone's fallen behind, that is the place where you want to try to apply TOC. So when we were talking about this, we had recently had a clerical who left to go back to school, but this clerical was always behind for some reason. And we couldn't necessarily always pinpoint why. And it's probably because we always had these hypotheses of, oh, I know why she's behind. And guess what? We were wrong all the time. And so I said, let's look at her process and see if we can figure out where the flow slows down, right? So we begin to unpack this. So we were talking about her process, and what she really fell behind on was her filing. Okay, she had this cabinet with filing. So here's what her process was. Investigator concludes the report, goes to supervisor. Supervisor approves report, gives the clerical. Clerical sends out letters, puts the report together, and then clerical takes it to be filed. But this clerical took that report and didn't file it. She took this report and walked over by the supervisor's office, and over by the supervisor's office there was this bookshelf, okay? And down here there was this shelf, and it had a label on it. And the label said this, to be filed. She'd take that report and put it there, to be filed. Then she'd come back to her desk, she'd do some more work, she'd get some more hotlines. She'd send out the letters, do everything she had to do. She'd get those reports, and she'd take them over to this bookshelf, and she'd put them in that, where'd she put them? To be filed. Okay, good. You guys are catching on. She'd come back to her desk, do some more work, get some more hotlines, send out the letters, do what she had to do, bring it back over to the bookshelf and put it to be filed. Then what we uncovered was this. Guess what happened on this bookshelf? The thing was top to bottom loaded with to be filed, right? And matter of fact, it had two boxes on the floor in front of it of to be filed. And so we began to look at this, and we realized she was doing something, and I think we do this a lot too. Here's the concept. Before I tell you though, who's our Q's here?
Tasha Rogers is connected with.
And Tasha's not here, right?
No.
You guys know, anybody know Tasha? Who knows Tasha? Okay, who's friends with Tasha? One friend? Tasha got one friend? Like she got some half friends?
Maybe we don't admit.
Yeah. Okay, so what I'm about to say, do not say this in front of her because it will offend her. Because I said it in front of my Q and I about got physically assaulted. Okay? Here is the concept. It's the concept of an unnecessary Q. You see why she'd be offended? Alright? But here's the concept. Basically, in our system, we create unnecessary Qs, and really we shouldn't have a Q in our system. Because why? Because we're working things to completion, right? So when in TOC we talk about Qs, Qs are only used as basically holding places for things, for work, that doesn't get into our system. Now, we don't have a lot of Qs in our world, but what we do is we create unnecessary Qs in our process. Here's another illustration of how we do that. So, anybody ever worked with anybody from Jasper County 29th Circuit? Anybody know anybody from the 29th Circuit? Anytime I ask these questions, it's because I'm about to offend somebody or criticize them, and I need to know if it's going to get back to them. Okay? Anybody know Brian Garrity, their circuit manager? Okay. Brian, he's off limits. All right. So here's what Brian did. Brian and I are very good friends. Matter of fact, we go kayaking a lot, and I mouth him straight to his face, so I feel like I can do it in front of other people too. So Brian, I started talking about TOC with him. He got really excited. Brian's the kind of guy that takes the bull by the horns, and he'll start doing things. So Brian heard about TOC. He immediately went and bought, he has 14 investigators, and he bought 14 or 16 of these really nice magnetic whiteboards. And outside of Brian's office, he had this huge wall, and it's just covered with these whiteboards. And every investigator has their own board, and they started using TOC. But the first time I went over there to his office and I looked at his boards, I looked at him and I said, Brian, this is terrible. You did this completely wrong, and you need to change it right now. He looked at me, he's like, what are you talking about? He's like, this is right, this is working. You know, Brian, he when he does something, comes to it, he's working it, all right? So here's what he did. So we have an investigative process outlined here, right? Okay, so he started off really good. His boards, they started off with safety of the victim child and non-victim children, looking at a home visit, you know, this is our process, step by step. He had all that pretty good. He had the soup consult in here. The idea is, hopefully, most often we're doing this within 72 hours. We can do our safety consult with our soup. All that was good. And I think he even had like this follow-ups, collateral needed, whatever column. Okay, great. That's part of the process. And then right here, he had another column. And this is where he went wrong. He had this column right here that said, faces entry needed. So here's the process that he set up for his staff through his boards. I'm going to work this report all the way, and then I'm going to enter it all at one time in Faces. Well, when I was looking at his boards for the first time, guess how many of his reports out of all these investigators were sitting in this column that said, Faces entry needed? About 80%. About 80% of his reports were sitting there, and what he had done in his boards was create an unnecessary queue. And if you think about it, that's what we kind of have naturally done. You know, we go out, I remember when I was an investigator, I did it too. Get a report, like, oh man, this looks terrible. Go out there, you start working it, and get all the interviews, and find out it's either worse than you thought, or nothing at all, or whatever the case may be. And so, you get it all worked, you come back to your office, like, oh man, that was a lot. All right, I got to type that up, but I'll do it tomorrow. Put it in your filing cabinet, right? Tomorrow comes. What happens?
3 reports.
3 reports. Guess what I go do? I go work those things. And I'm interviewing kids, I'm doing CACs. I'm out there with these parents trying to engage and get them to change their ways or whatever the case may be. Working all this stuff. And then I get those 3 reports done, I come back, I go, man, I've done a lot, I'm going to type those up tomorrow. And I'll put them in my filing cabinet, right? Guess what happens tomorrow? Yeah, the more reports, or that one report I thought I was done from 2 weeks ago. Yeah, blew up. IIS isn't working well. I don't know, whatever the case may be. I got to go deal with that. And so, this is how we become bad multitaskers. That stuff builds up. But what our filing cabinet became, just like this bookshelf became, was an unnecessary queue. What was really interesting about the whole bookshelf scenario is that clerical, when she walked from her desk to that bookshelf, it was literally the same distance to the filing cabinet where they belonged. And so it was really unnecessary. Okay? So if you can avoid unnecessary queues, work things to completion, it's going to result in a reduction of multitasking, which will then increase your capacity. When you increase your capacity, reduce your multitasking flow goes, and then we know what happens there. Quality and throughput go up, operating expense goes down, right? Life gets good. All right? Here's the last last concept around multitasking, but I feel like it's so important that it goes on its own. And this is this concept of touch time versus elapsed time. Okay? Touch time is this: the amount of direct work you're doing on whatever your task is. Okay? So it's easiest to apply to like an investigation. Where are my investigators at? All right, investigators. And I know every report's different. And it may be different on different places, but average. Not your worst report, not your easiest report. On average report. How much direct time, touch time, do you do working on that report? And that includes drive time, phone time, CAC, we'll throw a CAC interview in there, home visit, soup consult, type up, conclusion. How much time on average report do you think it takes?
Not everybody at once.
Just throw out a number, we'll see if everybody likes it.
3 or 4 hours.
3 or 4 hours?
I think if you're including like drive times and CAC, things like that, you're looking closer to like 15, 16 hours.
15, 16 hours? Okay. What do you guys think?
I was going to say 8 to 12, yeah.
8 to 12?
I like that.
8 to 12?
12 is better.
8 to 12 average? Okay, we'll go 8 to 12. All right, so we're doing 8 to 12 of touch time, direct work on this report. Now let's talk about elapsed time. Elapsed time is the amount of time between the time it comes into your system to the time it leaves your system. All right, so what is the amount of time from the day we get a report to the day it's concluded?
44 days.
I was going to say
44 and 3/4 days.
all these things for you.
All right, so what I hear is we're doing, what do we say, 10 to 12 hours of work in 44 days. All right? The goal with TOC and what we're talking about, touch time versus last time, is trying to get that closer together. Now, maybe we only get it closer by 30 days. But every amount we get that closer, we're going to be seeing a reduction in multitasking, which results in all those other things. Okay? All right. So, any questions about multitasking? Stuff we've already talked about? or additional comments? Okay, it is 9:55, and so let's take a 10-minute break, and then we'll get back together. So everybody, did everybody get one of these with the outline on it? Okay, we need one over here. Do we have any more? I have some up here.
I'll bend down.
Pass that back. Does everybody else need one? There's two of them there. Everybody got your piece of paper because we're going to use it. So I want everybody to look at this side, the multitasking activity. Do not start writing. Because that happens to be people, we start getting competitive and we look, okay, and then they start writing. Don't start writing till I tell you, okay? Because I'm on time. Alright, so we're going to do this activity and I'm going to go through the instructions. The instructions are this. You see there's 3 columns. We're going to start there on the left. Letter, number, and shape. See those 3 columns? Here's what we're going to do. Down that column in letter, we're going to write multitasking. In the number column, we're going to write 1 through 12. In the shape column, we're going to draw the shapes square, circle, triangle. Okay? And we're going to repeat that all the way down. But the first time we're going to do it as we're multitasking. So we're going to do it row by row. All right? So it's going to be M1 squared, U2 circle, all the way down. Okay? So the other thing, do I have one guy in here? Okay. You're the only guy in your
We have that
office?
in our office.
All right, well, I got really bad news for you. I've done this is probably my 24th time or so to do this. And until yesterday, I think that was yesterday, a guy has never won the multitasking activity. Now, I watched this guy that won, and there's something wrong with him. He had this pen. I don't know, it's just like, he was really fast. Anyway, he did win. That was the first time. So, I don't know what kind of shots you got in this room today, but good luck to you, okay? So, does everybody understand the instructions? Are you guys ready? All right. The other thing that I do is create some anxiety, like you guys are ready to win this competition, right? And this guy up in front of you, he won't quit interrupting you. You're ready to do this, right?
Oh.
Okay, so here we go. Let me get my little timer out, drag this out as long as I can, right? Killing you. Okay, so here we go. Oh, one more thing. I love doing that. There may be some distractions as you're trying to multitask, right? Because we always have distractions, so there may be distractions, okay? Is your anxiety level up yet? Are you getting annoyed? You ready to do this? All right, here we go. Good luck, guy. On your mark, get set, go. Make sure when you get done, you signal me somehow, because I'm going to time it. We'll see who gets done first, and then I'll continue to track. The other thing is, check your accuracy. I don't know how hard this is with someone talking, when you're trying to listen to them, but those shapes, that's really where the accuracy comes up as a problem. What was it? Triangle, circle, square, rhombus, I don't know, stop sign, I don't know, what are you drawing over there? Is your accuracy being impacted? Really funny story about guys. Oh, we got it done.
Wow.
Okay. Wow, we got one person done. Done. Oh, guys, second place. Good job. Here we go. Here we go. Triangle, circle, square. Triangle, circle, square. Circle, square, triangle. Right? Right?
Done.
Okay. We're cooking. We're cooking.
Done.
I don't know if I got it.
Still have a couple more. Okay, I think we got everybody. Anybody still going? Oh. All right. We'll cut it off there. Okay. I want to tell you a really funny story about guys. That was good. Second. Look. So I was doing this one time. And I was running the timer, and this guy, I could tell he was still writing. And he had his paper, and he's just staring at it. His pen wasn't moving. I'm still timing. I'm waiting on him to finish. So I'm sitting here, and time's just going on and on and on. And so finally, I mean, it went a ridiculous amount of time. I said, hey, what's the problem? He goes, I couldn't think of any more shapes. He could think about 7 or 8 shapes, and that's as many as he could think about. And so I said, okay, you didn't listen, you didn't follow instructions, and you didn't ask about the instructions. Okay. All right, so let's make some observations about this. What do you think your quickest time, what was the time that we got done the quickest?
40 seconds.
40? Any other guesses? 20? All right, here's what it was. It's 30 seconds. Okay? And what do you think it took the entire group to get done?
A minute.
Minute? I heard 2 minutes.
Minute 15.
Minute 15. Really close. A minute 10. Which, that's a really good time for you guys. I think the quickest time we've had so far was like a minute 11. Somewhere in there. So you guys are beating the quickest time, I think. But I want you also to observe this about the distance between the times. Our fastest was 30 seconds. Our everybody got done in a minute 10. That's a pretty big gap. And this is what we know about multitasking. We already talked about it. When we multitask, it affects people differently. Some people it just affects a little. Some people it affects a lot. Okay? So that's what creates that big gap. When we think about it in our work, like that's sometimes why there's such a disparity between our highest performer and our not highest performer. Okay? It's because of the multitasking. All right? So here's what we're going to do. You get to do this again. But you're going to get to do it in a way that feels right. And that's go down the column. So write multitasking 1 through 12 and then your shapes. Okay? Any questions about that? I'm going to time you again. So when you get done, signal me so we can keep track of that. All right? On your mark, get set, go.
Done.
Okay, everybody done? All right. Any guesses on the quickest time there?
28.
28? Any other guesses?
35.
35? 18 seconds. And I have had guys win when we don't multitask. Just saying. And we did today. All right. How long do you think it took the entire group to get done?
40 seconds.
40? Any other guesses? 50? Any other guesses? 32 seconds. So when we don't have to multitask, that's just an illustration to show how much capacity we gain by not multitasking. Okay, so now I want to transition into what's called the principles of flow. This is not all the principles of flow, but these are the highlights. And so the first principle of flow, we don't get to do a lot in our world. Okay? Where TOC says all of your work should go through this before it enters your system, we don't have that luxury of saying or closing the door, right? We already kind of talked about that. But what if we could do some of it is the question that I want you to ask yourselves as you go back to your offices and continue work. And here's the concept. It's the concept of triage. So I talked about a queue of pending work before it gets in our system. Triage is the process in which we determine when and where it comes into our system. Okay? So I've got cases, I triage them. I can triage the right time. Well, what if I had some better understanding capacity? I triage capacity. So you'll look at this board here, it's our investigative board. You'll notice some of these stickies have little red dots. Initially, I think we thought, or we used those little red dots to indicate like overdue reports. But what if, we'll call those indicator marks. Like if you had different color indicator marks on a sticky, it could mean different things. But what if red meant not overdue, but it was a complex case? if we've ever done investigations, we know we get these reports. Sometimes we read them for the very first time. We look at them and we go, I'm going to have a bad day, right? Who's done that? Yeah, we've been there, okay? So what if we can identify that bad day as a quality indicator marked on our reports, okay? And then as I'm triaging stuff, I've got Joe and I've got Susie. Joe's up next, okay? But Joe and Susie have the same amount of reports, give or take one or two. Right? Yeah, again, I start looking at the board. I notice Joe has 10 complexity indicator marks on his reports, and Susie has 1 or 2. Maybe I triage this and you say, you know what? I'm not giving it to Joe, I'm giving it to Susie because of the the complexity indicator marks that I see on his board, right? What if I know this? Joe plans to complete 3 reports today. But I know this. If I give Joe this 1 report today, what happens? Joe doesn't complete 3 reports today, right? So if I can just keep this report and wait till tomorrow to give it to Joe, then guess what Joe does? Completes 3 reports, right? And now I've just traded for Joe and my system 1 for 3, right? And so I've reduced multitasking in that scenario. Now, we don't always have the luxury of waiting a day. But is there ways that we can look at that or push back on that? And I know that there have been some thoughts around changing possible timeframes in certain types of cases. You know, we may get to where we have a little more flexibility with triaging reports. But it's about thinking through that a little bit more, a little bit better. Let me ask you guys this question. In your offices, how many reports do you have sitting in some sort of queue waiting to be assigned? No? None? You don't have any? You don't have a queue of reports anywhere? Good. How long does it take a report to get assigned when it comes into your office? Who sits by the printer? Who wants to whose heart starts beating real fast when the printer goes off?
Yeah, anytime
When I
I
hear
hear
that
Timmy
piece of
stapler.
When the lady walks in, it walks.
Oh, did I hear clerical stapler?
Yeah.
Is that what I
Or
heard?
when I hear them walking back with the paper fluttering as it walks back.
Oh, yeah. So I would assume, I'm making some assumptions about you guys that, reports come in, they get assigned immediately. Maybe it's a rotation list. Is that what we're using? Rotation list? Then we assign it. Now, I'm not saying that's bad, but what I'm saying is maybe there's a way to think about this a little differently that's more effective. And I don't know what that looks like for you in your office, but there could be things out there that we could consider a little bit more that might have a bigger impact. Okay? And triage is one of those concepts. Any questions about triage or other comments? Okay, the next one. Most of the time is a crowd favorite. And this is the concept of full kit. Anybody heard of full kit before? One person? Okay, good. So I could almost tell you anything and you wouldn't know any different, right? Here's the concept of full kit. TOC tells us that nothing gets into our system unless it has a full kit. Okay? Now, in our world, that's not always feasible, right? And so it says nothing gets in our system without a full kit, and also, and anytime there's a handoff in the work, there's a full kit. Here's what a full kit is. It's everything you need to have in order to complete the job. Okay? When they talk about full kit, they talk about painting a room in your house. How many of you have ever painted a room in your house? Not. I figured there'd be more of you. So like 3. Who's painted a room in your house? You guys need to wake up. There we go. Yeah. Now, here's where I really make a distinction and I separate people because I'm about to find out if there's a liar in the room. You guys ready for this? We're going to see who's a liar because there's always one. And it's not just because Kyle's traveling with me, okay? So there's a liar in this room. We'll find him. How many of you painted a room? Raise your hand. Raise them high. Those of you who painted a room in your house, how many of you have painted that room, done all the work, patchwork, whatever, start to finish, and you never left the room one time because you needed to go get something else? How many of you are going to say you did that? You guys are the most honest group I've met. So I appreciate that honesty. And so, yeah, what are some things we need to paint a room? Paintbrush, what else? Paint,
Primer.
tape, primer, what?
Oh,
A ladder? What else?
Somebody in St. Charles said alcohol, but I disagree with that.
Somebody to pay?
It's hard to disagree with yourself, Kyle.
Drop
What else
box.
you need? What if you had teenagers living in this room? Think of anything else you might need? Male teenagers? Some air freshener? Maybe some wall patch kits, you know? All right, so I'm the type of home repair guy, like, I can't take out the trash without going to Lowe's 3 times because I need something I forgot, right? That's kind of how it goes in my world. So that's what a full kit is. You have everything, complete the job before you start and before it comes into your system. Now, we can't always do that. Can you guys think of any places where we have handoffs in our work?
Reassigning a
Yeah.
case.
FCS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
ACFCS, so investigator to FCS worker. All right, let me make another assumption about you guys. Has there ever been a situation, and I'm going to call it where there was a discussion between investigations and FCS about what a full kit looks like? You guys ever had that? Maybe it looked like this. FCS worker looks at the investigator and goes, "What do you want me to do with this?" You guys ever had that? Okay, am I the only one? All right. Or investigator looks at FCS worker and says, "I opened that. Aren't you going to do something?" Right? So at times we have these disagreements, right, about what maybe looks like a full kit. I think right now, I'm going to guess, like we've gotten a little bit better at this because probably in that transition, we are doing some family assessment work, right? When we're opening cases for FCS, maybe we have a harm and danger statement, like some of that stuff. So we probably today have less arguments or discussions about what a full kit looks like. But back in the day when we had that old FCS referral, it's like, you didn't even tell me that grandma lived there, right? That's maybe information I need to know in an FCS worker, right? So we had this debate, this constant debate of what a full kit looks like. Now, there is some really good news that I know we don't have this debate very much anymore, but TOC settles it forever. Because TOC tells us who gets to decide what a full kit looks like. Any guesses on who gets to decide what a full kit is? Who gets to decide it? The person receiving it, right? It's always the person downstream that decides what the full kit looks like. Why is that?
They're the ones that gotta live with it.
They got to live with it, and they know what they need to do that job, right? And so they get to decide what the kit is. All right? Sorry, investigators. So that's full kit. Any questions about full kit? The next principle of flow is called quality at source. Quality at source is mistake proofing. Okay? They give examples of like automatic headlights in cars, stuff like that. That's quality at source. When I think of quality at source in our work, the first thing I thought about was our conclusion templates for investigations that come from our manual. If like it's a POE, like cut and paste this and fill it in. All right, that is quality at source type stuff. Okay, now here is the one part of the entire talk where I throw out some caution for you, because and it lands here with quality at source. There is something that could happen if this is not handled appropriate that will take us back to this place that we just came from, that we decided was no good, and we decided we're never going back there. Okay, and this is the land of check boxes. Quality at source could, in our heads, cause us to think more checkbox type things. We decided that was not the place we wanted to be, because here's what happens when we create checkboxes. We take away the need to critically think through whatever the problem is. And in our world, if we think about translating TOC to our world, like checkbox might be great in a factory, but in our world, we cannot lose our ability to critically think. Because not only do we need to have that ability to think through problems, and so But we have to teach our people, our clients, our parents, that same skill. So if we do away with it through a checkbox, we no longer have to do it, we lose the skill too. And we can't do that. That was nice. So be very careful with quality at source, not to create a bunch more checkboxes, because when you do, it takes away our critical thinking ability because we don't practice it as much. Okay? So the other thing though that quality at source and the checkbox, like to be very careful with, because this, once we start doing checkboxes, the next thing that follows is micromanaging. And we have worked really hard to work micromanaging out of our culture. We still have accountability, but not in the form of micromanaging. When we start doing check boxes, that opens the door for micromanaging. A lot of people thought when we started doing these boards, like, if we're not careful with this, it could turn into micromanaging too. Matter of fact, one of the meetings we were in, they had this video of a supervisor, had a whole unit board, and had their staff in front of them, and it was a demonstration on how to use the boards. And I remember Tim, he kind of really stood up, and after this video, he basically said this. He said, "That's offensive," because it felt like micromanaging to him. And so we want to be very careful. This is not about micromanaging. This is not about giving a supervisor the ability to, lord over you. You got to get this done. Here's your next task. Blah blah blah. That's not what this is about. This is about a way of figuring out how can we know where we're at, figure out where we're going, and look at what's keeping us from getting there. Okay? So it's an individual tool that each one of you can use to increase your productivity. It's not about micromanaging. It's not about checklists. So quality at source will increase our capacity, but don't let it increase your capacity at the cost of losing your ability to critically think. Okay? That's where we land. Any questions about quality at source? Okay, the next principle of flow. I really enjoy this next part. Okay? So the next principle of flow is called synchronization. Synchronization is this. It's synchronizing your system where everything flows at the same rate. Okay? So if we took this 15 and we, offloaded, some of these duties to increase here, we took away here, and we got it to 15 all the way across our system, do we see an increase in our productivity? If we had 15 across the board? Okay? By how much? 5, right. So that's what synchronization is about. So let me talk about this alternative care board a little bit, and we'll talk about synchronization. So here's, just so you understand what the board is. This part from here up, this is the only part that is actual work in progress board. Okay? This here is a quality measure we'll talk about later. Down here is status measures, and we'll talk about that in a little bit later. So right up here is the only part of this board that is work in progress. Okay? And here's what this is how it's designed. I mentioned earlier that I really got stumped, like, what is our process in AC? And it was only through, like, really thinking hard and then being exposed to the trajectory that all of a sudden it hit me. When we have a case that's reunification, we are working through a process of visitation. Now, what we're really doing is we're going from this place where kids are unsafe to a place where they can be safe at home, right? And we get there on this continuum. We get there through 2 things. 1, parent engagement, and 2, safety network. Okay? So that's what this is working us through. As we move along here, we're increasing our parent engagement, and we are building our safety network, right? And so when we're doing that, we get to move through these stages of visitation. Now, I want to do a soapbox, and I don't know where you land on this, or if what I'm about to say is offend you. This is the part where I say I don't care because I'm that passionate about what I'm about to say, okay? You'll notice on this board, there is not a spot for no visitation, okay? Because I don't believe that we have situations where we cannot safely supervise. There's not a judge on the planet that's going to convince me that myself or my staff could not keep children safe in a supervised setting. So it doesn't even make it to my board, okay? We don't even accept it as something okay. All right, so that's my soapbox. Back off it. We're going to supervised visits, okay? So we start at supervised. Here's the question. in your guys' circuit, I know every case is different. Not your worst case, not your best case, average case. Average time, how much time are you at supervised visits before you can go to unsupervised? A month or less? What circuit is this again? Okay, we need to do some AI work around that and figure out what's going on there. Are you guys all in agreement with that?
It also depends too if they're involved in family dependency treatment court, because that their compliance with treatment court identifies when they can go to unsupervised visitation and overnights.
But that's only for half of the survivor.
We're Pike County, ours is a month or less.
But even with that, you still have some flexibility. The team can decide to move faster than the drug court does.
Correct.
So you got some cases that are doing supervised visits less than a month before they go to unsupervised?
Yes.
And that's not supervised by grandma or somebody else. That's just truly unsupervised.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. That's not the norm, so I'm not going to go with that. But I think that's great, and I think we need to find out more about that. But so let's go with what I would say across the state more we would think our average is. What do you guys think? I heard 6 months to a year. What else did I hear?
For supervised?
Yeah, supervised visits before you go to unsupervised.
So that's in the case too, where they're doing what they need to do.
3 to 6.
Right.
Okay, not your best case, not your worst case, your just average case. 3 to 6. What do you guys think? Okay, so right there we'll go 3 to 6. How long are we on supervised visit or unsupervised visits before we can start doing some overnight? 1 to 2 what? Months. So you guys do 1 month of supervised and 1 to 2 of unsupervised?
But the time goes up. It could be times 2, it could start out as an hour unsupervised, go to 2 hours unsupervised, 4 hours unsupervised, and we should get to 1 to 2 months.
Okay. I'm liking what I'm hearing over here. All right, but what do you guys, some of the others that aren't there, where they live, that's a great place or something, I don't know. Whatever's going on there, we'll figure it out. What average unsupervised, how long are we on unsupervised? Before we go to overnights? 2 to 3. All right, so we got 3 to 6, 2 to 3. How long are we at overnights before we can go to weekends? 4 weeks? All right, how many weekends are we doing before we can try home visit? 2 to 4 weeks? Sound good? All right. How long are we at try home visit before we go to reunification? Before we get it? 90 days? Are we doing the minimum? Do we have that language from our courts? Minimum 90 days? Okay. 90 days, 5 years. All right. Everybody like 90 days? All right. So remember our river, our flow. When we're starting here, how fast is our river flowing? Slow. I'm not sure we're still in the river. I think we're in the lake, and I'm just hoping to find the river channel, right? So we get to unsupervised, what happens? Current speeds up a little bit. We get to overnights, what happens? We're flying now, right? Weekends. And all of a sudden, we get to try home visit, what happens? We're on the Big Sugar, and we just hit one of those big pools, right? We got to start paddling, right? So synchronization is, what if we could synchronize this system? Let's say we did 1 to 2 months at each one of these steps. Can you think about, one obvious thing is we probably can get kids home quicker, right? That's pretty obvious. But can you think of any other benefits of spending more time here than here? Yeah. More capacity because we don't have to supervise as many visits, right? What about through signs of safety? You think of any benefits that would give us there?
This is a true picture of the family.
We get a much better picture of the family, is that what you said? How would we do that?
We did the establish their safety network and solidify that.
When we do supervised visits, what do we learn about parents?
Would they like to eat?
Yeah. When I'm standing in the room, guess what? They're nice to their kids, right? We know that's what we learn, right? When we're doing unsupervised visits and maybe even overnights in some of this area, what do we learn? How to act when we're not there. And is that really what we want to know? But we spend very little time here, right? We spend all of our time here not learning anything that will help this family, right? On that. I know we don't have complete control over that, and honestly, our parents have some control over that, right? But we do have control over our process and doing things like parent engagement. You think about your parent engagement. What have you done? What process have you used to engage them? And then you can think about how it's working. We'll talk about that in quality measure. All right, any comments or questions about synchronization? What that means?
Can you repeat what, like, your definition of synchronization is?
It's basically taking your system and having the flow the same. So whatever your process, it's spending the same amount of time working at each step of the process. Okay, and the last principle of flow is called FIT. F-I-T-T. That's frequency, intensity, time, and type. Here's what it means. It's about spending your time and attention or your energy where it makes the most sense. Okay? Let me give you a hypothetical. Okay? Let me say that again. It's hypothetical. All right? Before we go to this land of dreams, I want you to remember it's hypothetical. Always, I give this illustration like someone looks at me, oh, that's not even possible. I know it's hypothetical. Okay? So here we go. What if I was your circuit manager and I come in, I got new AC case. Where's my AC workers? I know I had more than one. Okay, I only have 2 AC workers? I thought I had more than that earlier. Okay, so, soups, AC soups, okay? I got AC workers, I got you a new case. I walk in, I hand it to you. Here's what I tell you. I said, I want you to take this new case. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to take all your other cases, I'm going to offload them to somebody else for 30 days. Okay? For the first 30 days, I want you to do nothing but work on this one case. And in that first 30 days, I've got some expectations. I want you to go visit this family multiple times a week. I want you to get your family assessment map completed within the first 7 days. And I want you to have at least 5 people identified on this family safety network and have some meetings and whatever else in the first 30 days. And I want you to do that the first 30 days. Do you think that would make a difference on your cases? I know you're shaking your head because you're like, I don't want my families to go to somebody else, right? Is that what you're thinking? Okay, I know, it's hard. But what if you did this on every case and it made a difference for everybody? Would it be worth it? Like if those families you didn't want to be parted with for 30 days, what if they all benefited from this? Because your cases, you had more capacity to spend with them. Would it be worth it? Okay? Now, this does lead me into any questions about FIT? Frequency, intensity, time, type. It's spending your time and attention. I'll be honest, like it may be a conversation like right here is where we need to spend extra time and attention because this is where it slows down, right? So that's the conversation about frequency, intensity, time, and type. Making your energy and effort where it means the most, okay? So all this wraps together in this one concept that I think really lands us in this like goal area. Like, what do we want to do? Here's what we want to do. We want to do our blue light activity, okay? How many of you know what blue light activity is? Where this comes from? Okay, good. Another place where I can just make stuff up. All right, so here's what blue light activity is. It's your system critical activity. It's why your system exists. What does your system exist to do? When you can figure that out, you can figure out what your system critical activity is, and TOC calls that your blue light activity. And here's why they call it that. It comes from an illustration. Going back to the manufacturing world. There was this manager of this manufacturing plant. He was looking over his plant and he decided, you know what, I want to become more productive. I want to figure out ways that we can produce more in our factory. So he's watching his process, he begins to investigate, and what he just uncovers is this, that the more this blue light is on, the more productive his facility is. And so he went in to make some observations about what this blue light is. What he found was the blue light was the blue light of the welder. And the more this blue light was on of the welder, the more productive this plane is. So he understood TOC. He used TOC because he had to identify the welder's process. Here's what he identified. He said that welder, before he could ever turn that blue light on, he had to go to the station before, get the product he's going to be welding, and then he had to bring that back to his workstation. He would get that to his workstation, then he'd have to prepare that material to be welded, right? After he prepared the material, he had to put on all his protective gear, and then guess what? He picked up his welder and did what? Turned on that blue light, right? And then he welded that material. After he got done welding, he did what? Turned the blue light off, took off all his protective gear, took that piece to the next station, and then started that process all over again. Now, what was his blue light activity? His system critical activity was what? Welding. Good. Can you guys think of any ways that you could have increased his time welding? Yeah, if he didn't have to take off his gear, that would help. What else?
Not having to move the pieces themselves.
Yeah, here's what we know about system critical activity or blue light activity. It can only be done by a skilled professional, right? Not anybody can be a welder. It takes skill, knowledge, and talent. I'll tell you a story. I'm not a welder. I'm barely anything when it comes to home improvement. But I was over at my brother-in-law's house one time, and I saw this welder sitting in his garage. And I said, "Hey, did you get a welder?" He goes, "Yeah, I picked up some garage sale." I said, "Hey, I'm going to take that home." That was a terrible idea. Note to self, don't take welder home. I brought the welder to my house. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was going to do it anyway. And so I broke out this welder, right, in my garage. And I started looking around. I was like, I don't even have any metal to weld, okay? What am I doing here? And so I called my brother-in-law. "Hey, bring me some metal." So he did. I think my brother-in-law didn't like me, okay? So I'm in my garage. I'm giving this welding a big, I don't know it wasn't really welding. It was just making a mess. That's what I was doing. But there were some bad things that happened when I was welding. I burnt my eyeballs. Like, for like a month, I had these white dots, like right in my line of sight. And that was terrible. And that was a big mistake. And guess what I didn't do anymore? Welding. Okay? The welder went back to my brother-in-law's. So it takes a skilled person. I want to emphasize this because it's really important, because you are our skilled professionals. Only you can do our system critical activity, our blue light activity. And so that's how important you are to all of this. Okay? So that's what our blue light activity. So we were exposed to this a year ago and through our TOC conferences. And so it led to this real discussion, because if you got to define what your system critical activity is, right? If you're going to know if you're doing it or not. I got to know if I'm doing my blue light activity. And so with many of the leadership around Children's Division, there was this great discussion about defining what our blue light activity. And I really liked what ultimately was agreed upon, and it was this. Our blue light activity is spending time with those families who need it. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you guys spend any time with families that don't need us there? I mean, we have a lot of cases where we're spending quality time with families who don't really need us. I think about our five-year trial home visit. I mean, we're waiting on what? Let me guess, a child custody order. We have some of those cases around. Do those families they're just waiting on a child custody order? Are we spending quality time with those families who don't need us anymore? Mm-hmm. We could be spending with families who do need us, right? So that's what our system critical activity is. Spending quality time with those families who need us. Okay? So we think about that. We think about hotlines. Like, we get all these hotlines that are fiction, right? Example I heard yesterday was dog feces all over the home, right? We had that report. We go out there and they don't even have a dog, right? Fiction, all right? And it's always that report that was called out, but it's that one anonymous reporter out there. I don't know where that person's at, but if we ever find them, we are going to be doing something great, okay? That anonymous reporter, I tell you what, he better watch out. Or she, I don't know. They're anonymous. So if we can ever find that anonymous reporter, it would be great. But yeah, how much time do we spend on hotlines of families that don't really need us? Yeah. What if we had the ability, I mean, there's even talk, Like things like expedited case closure. What if we had a process for that? We get in a hotline, we go check it out. It's fiction. Expedited case closure. Like we are on those cases, get them closed. We don't need those to be weighing us down any sort of way. Okay? Blue light activity, system critical activity. All right. So we've talked about all these principles, all these different things. Let's wrap it up with this. So if we're going to know if this is working, we got to have measures, right? We got to be able to measure it. I got to know if what I'm doing is working. So TOC talks about 3 different measures. 1, outcome measures. When we're talking about measures, they use the illustration of scoreboard. So I want you to think about a baseball scoreboard. All right? On a baseball scoreboard, where is the outcome measure?
Runs.
The runs, right? The score. That's how we determine the outcome of the game. Who wins, who loses, right? We know the score. That's the outcome. Now, the other type of measure is called status measures. Now, status measures tell us where we're at. So on a baseball scoreboard, what tells us where we're at in the game? Innings? Anything else? Strikes? Balls and outs, right? That tells us where we're at in the game. All right? Now, the last measure that we look at is quality measures. Now, on a baseball, this is the harder one. On a baseball scoreboard, what do you think would be our quality measures? Errors. Who said that? All right, man. Baseball fan right here. Errors. What else?
Batting average.
Stats. Yeah, that may be scrolling on the bottom. I don't know if it's actual on the scoreboard. There's one other thing. No? Hits. Hits. All right, so those are our quality, okay? So we translate this to our world, like our outcome. We know what our outcomes are. Reunification, adoption, terms POE. Like, those are outcomes. We know what that looks like. All right, but I don't know if we always pay attention to status and quality. So I've got an example of how to think through this that you can apply it another way. So I mentioned on this board, this top part is the only part that's work in progress. Okay? This next part, this middle section here, this is quality measure. Okay? And what I did here is I thought it was really important to pair these two, because quality measures is something that you can't wait till the end to know. I got to know now if what I'm doing is working, right? That's what quality is about. Figure out if what you're doing is working. So if my goal is to have parent engagement and build a safety network, I need to know if what I'm doing to accomplish that is working. So I developed these quality measures. Here's what I got for parent engagement. And this is looking at 1 month. Okay? So if in 1 month I had these 4 things happen, it's a pretty good indication that I have parent engagement. And it's these 4 things. 1 is, did they attend a home visit with me this month? 2, did they attend all their visits with their children? 3, did they attend all their services this month? Or have I observed any behavioral change in them this month? And then 4, did they attend all their FSTs or court this month? If I had all 4 of those things happen in 1 month, it's a pretty good indication that I have parent engagement, right? But if I only had 3 of the 4, what that tells me is this. Whatever process I was using to engage them wasn't working well enough. So I either need to look at it and do it differently or do more of it. Okay? But that's how I know if what I'm doing is working, right? Safety network. So we created this as a quality measure, looking at 4 things in 1 month to see if we have a safety network developing. 1 is, have I just identified those people naturally connected to the family? 2, are those people I've identified, or that have been identified, are they aware of the child welfare concern or the danger statement? 3, of those people that I've identified and are aware of the child welfare concern, do they have a role in the safety plan? And then 4, of those people with the role in the safety plan, have they demonstrated safety through that safety plan? If I've got all 4 of those things working in 1 month, pretty good indication that I've got safety network, right? So those are quality measures. Now here's status. Status tells us where we're at, right? And I'll be honest, when we started talking about work in progress boards, a lot of people started doing boards. But they weren't doing work in progress boards all the time. A lot of them were doing status boards. Okay? And that's what this is here. Now, I'm not saying status boards are bad. We just need to understand what they're telling us. because they're not telling us about flow, process, all this other stuff, but they are telling us something important. They're telling us how productive we are, or where we're at. And so this is status. Where am I at? And so right here, you could pick any four things. AC, there's a lot of things that we need to know the status of every month. And every one of those things has a different process, right? So looking at monthly parent home visits, I've just got incomplete and complete. And as we accomplish those each month, they move, okay? Now, if over 3 or 4 months I noticed that we were struggling getting this, like I know where we're at. We're not getting this done, right? So I knew the status of this. I knew it wasn't good. So you know what? Now I know it's not good. I want to do something about it. So what I do is I pull that out of status. I unpack that process, and I turn it into a work in progress. So I've outlined the process of monthly parent home visits. Now that process may be different for every individual worker, but that's what I outlined. Why? So I can figure out where we are at in the process with all these home visits that we have to do, and I can see it now. And when I can see it, I can see where the river flow slows down. And that's how we identify the constraint, begin to attack it, unpack it, and then get the flow going back. Okay? So that's where the importance of status can really take us. But if that's all we do, if it's all we're doing is status, here's what we'll do. We'll look at it and go, we're not getting those done. And then we'll do that hypothesis thing. We think we know why we're not getting it done, and then we'll just accept that as true. But we never find out if that's why we're not getting it done. Because then next month, guess what? We have the same problem. Well, I thought we fixed that problem. I thought we did too. Well, let's keep on going. Well, if we can do it in a work in progress, you're going to be more successful in finding out exactly why you're not getting it done. Okay? So, let me talk, since we got a lot of investigators, I want to talk real briefly about this board as far as how to use it. Okay? So, questions that have come up, of course, we understand now that this is a process of investigation. This is the investigative process step by step. So, when people are using this, now, I'm just giving you how people have used it. You may come up with a different way to use it, and that's fine. I'm just giving you examples so you can think about it, you can run with it, see what works for you. But here's how this board is set up to be used. So we have our sticky notes indicate different cases. In this case, the different colors indicate investigation assessments. And then these stickies, how we do it is our clerical, they'll write out the sticky, and it goes here. Because this is what we need to do next. So the sticky always goes with the next task. So when we get a report, the first thing we've got to do is what? See the victim child, right? So our clerical, when a report gets assigned, the clerical puts that sticky right here. Investigator walks in, sees it, goes, they know that's what I got to do. Okay? So when you're putting your stickies or moving them, you always land them what you have to do next. Now that may not always be in order. Like, I know some cases, you all probably had a case where the last thing you did on that case was the home visit, right? So maybe you're over here and then this sticky has to come back here. It may work like that. Whatever works best for you. Now when we were talking about this, I had some investigators go, you know what, I don't like that. That's too complicated for me. So I want to know where I'm at, everything I've got done on my case so I know exactly what I've left to do. Okay, that's fine. Here's what they decided to do. They put the names of all their families on this end and then created this grid with lines. And then as they completed tasks, they would put an X. Okay? And then they knew exactly if they had a home visit and a follow-up to do, everything else was X'd out. They knew that's what they had left to do. Okay? So that's how they use that. Now, you guys remember my story where I was mounting my friend Brian? So this board is set up differently than Brian's with the faces needed entry, but you'll notice it's still on there. But it's set up like this, and we did this intentional. We put the faces entry needed here, because here's how this works. I go do this task, and then the next thing I do is enter that in faces before I can go on to the next step. Okay? So it sets up the process that you enter as you go. Alright, so that's what the faces needed entry spot is for. And then the swim lane, this is totally for however you want to use it. So if you come in, you look at your board, and you can triage now what you want to do today. So maybe you got a report here, you know I got to do that today. It comes down to your swim lane. Then you look at the rest of the board and you think about what you could do and use the best of your time. So then those come down here and you know, for today that's what you're working on. And also, if your supervisor comes by and they look at this, then they know what you're working on today too, right? So if they're deciding to assign you a report, and they're like, man, I know that these 3 reports down here, she plans on concluding today. And so maybe I won't give them that report because they're going to close those 3 today, and I want that to happen. I'm going to give it to Joe. Joe always gets all the reports, so it's okay. All right, so any questions about that board, or this board, or anything else? Where are we at on time? What time do we have?
5 minutes.
5 minutes? Okay. So I did want to talk about this. So I didn't spend a lot of time on this, but just to give you, like, I don't know if this is making sense to you. I don't know if this is something like, man, maybe that'll work. But I want to give you some information about our experience and what we found that made it work. So I mentioned that we first learned about TOC in November of last year. Okay, it was matter of fact, the last week in November. Prior to that, in my circuit, remember I have 6 investigators. Prior to that summer, in July and August, in that time frame, we had 100 overdues between those 6 investigators. From that summer, July and August, we worked really hard. And we set a goal. Like, it was not acceptable to have overdues. And so we set a goal. We're not going to have overdues. We worked hard. Those 6 investigators, supervisors, we had people doing all sorts of stuff. We worked hard. By the time November came, we were under 10, and we were very close to hitting 0. TOC came, and I want to say it was middle of December, we got to 0. And we have not had an overdue since. And so, when we started looking at TOC, we started looking at things a little differently. Like our open reports, like how many reports do I have open right now. I would look at it for our whole circuit, between our 6 investigators. Individually, I looked at all this. One other thing we looked at was our average days of completion. How quickly are we getting reports completed on average? And so I had my Q pull some data for me. And this goes back to July, that summer we had 100 overdues, July 2017. And I have the highest that we ever got. So, and that was in September 2017. Any guesses on how high we got as far as our average days to completions on all the reports that we received in the month of September? Any guesses?
60.
60? Other guesses? Here's what it was. 47 days. We were averaging an overdue in our average days to completion. So we began to work. Of course, we started gaining capacity because we got that backlog reduced. So we quit carrying all that bad multitasking around with us. So it began to reduce. Then all of a sudden, in November and then in December, we started learning about TOC. By January, we started to implement it. And then if you remember, in February and March, we went on pause. Did you guys go on pause? You guys remember the pause? Pause was fantastic for my people because, one, we didn't have any overdues. We could help others. That was a great experience for a lot of them. But it also gave us the time to really dig in through these concepts of TOC and figure out, we're never going back. What are we going to do differently that we never go back to this? And so that's what we worked on. Now, through all that, of course, our average days to completion got lower. And we got to our lowest point in April of this year. Any guesses what our lowest point was? 16? Really close. It was 17. Our average days to completion for every report we received in April 2018 was 17 days. When you can get there, life becomes great. And it wasn't just great for our investigators. It's great for their supervisors. It was great for AC staff. Everybody's in a better mood. Everybody has less stress. And we were able to maintain this weight that was far more manageable, that allowed us also to do our blue light activity more. And we were able to sustain it because we got there. It was slow getting started, and we slowly built momentum. We finally got there. Now, we went up since we got to 17, okay? And I want to be transparent about this with you. So the most recent data I can pull is September of this year. And so for our circuit in September, we increased, our average days to completion was 30 days, okay? We went up from 17 to 30, okay? But here's what also happened since April 2018. 2017, or 2018. In August, we had, remember I have 6 investigators, okay? I lost one. She got her master's in May. By August, she was going to private practice. I lost one investigator, okay? I also, at the same time, had another investigator go on maternity leave. I was down 2. You go from 6 to 4, life changes, okay? It's a big deal. And so we were nervous. But those 4 hunkered down, and the thing about it was, they didn't have this big weight they were already carrying around, so it made that reduction in capacity a little easier to take, all right? Now, we did some other things, too, to offset it, but I have not had 6 investigators since August, and we still have not had an overdue. Now, before TOC, I'd have never thought that was possible. But because we think differently, we're doing things differently, we've made it possible, and things I never thought were possible are coming true. And I'm not just saying that because we did it. I've seen it in large circuits. I've seen it in small circuits. And the reason I'm here is because I want everybody to know these are the things that are possible if we just change how we're thinking a little bit. Okay? So, are there any other questions about anything we talked about today?
When you're decreasing your average days of reports,
Yeah.
are you looking at just like investigations solely, or investigations, assessments, differential response?
I think this is investigations and assessments. So
not the DRs.
right. In our circuit, we don't do DR.
Okay.
So that's not a factor for us.
Okay.
I mean, we do it on occasion, but we don't have a designated person for DR. But it is important to understand that, like, if you're doing DR, like, it has meaning. It has capacity impacts. And when you're calculating these things, you need to evaluate, do I separate it to know where I'm at? Like, what am I looking for so I know how to think about it? It's a good question, yeah.
When you started to decrease the numbers that each of your investigators had, you had 6, what was their average caseload? What were they?
How many were they carrying at one time?
Yeah.
Under 10. When we're fully staffed, and the other thing I didn't mention on that when we increased, the other thing I've done since August 2 is I took my 2 highest performing investigators and I promoted them. And so we lost that capacity and replaced it with new staff. So that's also had an impact that you would think would, sink the ship, but it hasn't. But I set a goal for everybody that I don't want them having over 15 open reports at any point in time. That's the goal. Now, since like right now, I may have 1 or 2 around 20. But that's it. And so a lot of my people, when we were fully staffed, and I probably shouldn't say this, we're on film, but so I had this real scary situation one day. All right, so we reduced the number of cases we had open. I got everybody under 15. I had a lot of people, almost all of them under 10. And I had those that were high performers, they stayed under 5. That's just where they lived. And so I had this one real sketchy situation because we got there, and through the pause, like, that's all we did. We got there, and then we maintained it. And so then we got to summertime, right? So April, and then we got into July, and all of a sudden something really crazy happened. The printer quit going off. And I don't know why. We were just lucky. I'll be honest, like, I don't know what happened, but people quit calling the hotline. We had about half the normal reports we get in the month of July. So because we had already reduced all this, like, we weren't carrying around all this weight, then all of a sudden we got a break, something went our way, and we could take advantage of it. But I was walking by one of my investigators' cubes during that period of time. I looked at her board, she had one sticky up there. I said, man, you only got 1 open report? And she looked at me, she kind of looked down. She had been trying to hide this. That 1 open report she had on her board was not really open. It was in her office, ready to be approved. She sat around, this was day 2 of not having any open reports. I didn't know, but that really happened. Because we got a couple breaks, but we got ourselves in position to take advantage of them. Yeah.
What are you talking about the pause in February? What is
Yeah.
that?
So the pause, this came from November when we had our TOC talks. We had this tremendous backlog of overdue investigations throughout the entire state. And so through that discussion, there was this, what are we going to do? Well, and Kristen, she really emphasized this. It's like credit card debt. It's killing your capacity. And so you've got to get rid of your backlog. That's not step number one in any of these processes. You've got to reduce your backlog. So she really looked us straight in the eye. And when I say look us straight in the eye, she looked Tim straight in the eye. It was a really intense situation with all these people in the room. And she said, you're not doing anything else until you reduce this backlog. And Tim, in true Tim fashion, it was kind of like, and she asked permission to have this conversation with him, but she was very direct. And he goes, it's great. He goes, well, you don't quit paying your house payment and your utilities to pay off your credit card. The agreement that was eventually came to was this pause. And what the pause was is across the entire division, we paused all non-essential functions to focus solely on the backlog. And so, like, if you guys remember, we didn't have CQI that quarter. We quit doing science and safety training for those 2 months. In my circuit, we didn't have a circuit meeting, we didn't have a unit meeting, we didn't do nothing, but totally focus on, which we didn't have a backlog, but we were helping other people reduce their backlog, and then we were spending all of our energy and effort on figuring out how to stay there. So that's what the pause was.
Any other questions? We're going to get ready to go to Macon for another presentation this afternoon. If you would like to come up and take photos or of the information up on the wall, please feel free to do so.